In this video, we are going to talk about negative shapes or negative space. You can think of them as the same thing. So I'm going to use this stool as my example. Now my brain already has ideas about what a stool is. It's a thing you sit on, it's got legs, they go straight down to the ground and so on. In order to help me draw this more accurately, I can flip to thinking about the space surrounding the stool rather than the stool itself. And my brain doesn't really care about the stuff surrounding the stool. It doesn't have preconceived notions of what empty space is like. And for that reason, I'm able to draw it more accurately. So this is what I'm talking about with empty space. If I were to look at these shapes here, those shapes by themselves represent the empty space that passes through this stool. And if I get rid of the stool, you can see they're just kind of a collection of shapes hanging out there. And yet they describe the stool as accurately as the stool itself does in this picture. If I were to finish those out completely, I might end up with something like this, right? I have this empty space. There's no information about the stool at all here. There's only the space surrounding the stool. The trick in dealing with negative shapes is learning to see past what you're drawing to these empty shapes and relate them to each other carefully and accurately to arrive at the overall silhouette of what you're trying to draw. It's something that you can use in the middle of the drawing process to help you make judgments about how your proportions are coming together. The thing to remember about negative shapes is that they are the not object. What is that? It's everything that isn't the object. So anything that isn't stool, it could be trees, it could be library, all of that counts as negative space when we're talking about the stool. One of the tricks in drawing is learning to ignore this background stuff and look at the shapes that pass through that object instead. Sometimes it's very simple, like this stool is. Sometimes it's extremely complicated. Whether it's simple or complicated, it's a helpful skill to have to be able to switch to this way of looking at the object you're drawing, to be able to see through it and see these abstract shapes as you're drawing. If you can do that, you stand a much better chance of having proportional drawings in the end. Okay, in this video, I'm going to do a drawing of a stool. I'm going to start with a gesture like usual. It's a pretty light gesture though. Here I am drawing in that big, tall shape in the middle of it. I find it easier to start inside the object and find some basic shape that you can start with and then build the other shapes on top of that. So that's about how tall and wide it looks. Now I have to decide where is the other shape. Yeah, it's about the same height as this one, over just a little bit. Goes down, but it goes only about, I think, what's like halfway. There's an angle off the top here. This shape seems to fan out a little more drastically than the tall, thin one. Clean up those stray lines a little bit. Next shape seems to start at the bottom of this shape, so they share kind of a bottom edge. The bottom edges line up. I'm going to use a bamboo skewer because it gives me a little more accurate measurements. The pencil's a little hard to see past, especially these big fat pencils. So that's about how wide that seems. 2, 3. So it goes about 3 times into the height of that taller shape. So I was a little far, but relatively close. The width of that shape was about 2 of the tall, thinner shapes. So I'm just taking measurements to figure out what size is this shape. Taking a quick angle there to find where the top of this shape ends. So far, I only have 3 trapezoids on the page, but that's the purpose of this exercise. It's to draw these abstract shapes first and use them to arrive at the silhouette of your object, in this case, a stool. Checking how far down this leg goes. Where is the bottom of that leg? And I can measure that. I compare the length of the bottom shape I'm drawing to that big tall shape I already drew. Or anything else I can think of that I trust. I'm going to enclose this shape a little bit. It's not enclosed in the reference image, but I'm going to enclose it just so it looks like a trapezoid as well. This shape comes down but stops roughly there. But I know that represents the back leg of the stool, but I'm trying not to think about that as I draw it. The corner of this shape and the corner of that other shape across the page seem to be roughly even with each other and higher than the bottom two corners that are in the middle. Edge of that seems to be arced, and then it seems to arc up as well because I can see the back of the stool also. The temptation might be to make this part of the stool cup downwards because we know you can sit down into it. The seat is carved out a little bit, but that's not what I see in the negative space. And that's my negative shaped stool. It's just practice looking at those negative shapes and trying to draw this stool without actually drawing the stool.